The Great is Hulu's outrageous period comedy exploring the rise of Catherine the Great. I'm Rob Licuria, senior editor at Gold Derby, here with the show's co-star Nicholas Hoult. Nicholas, you're most known for your film work over the last few years especially. So why did you decide to return to TV, and why The Great?
Hello, by the way. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, that's quite an easy transition for me. Yeah, I've been mainly focusing on film work because I just want to keep a variety in this kind of types of films and roles that I'm playing. But then I was lucky to be a part of The Favourite, which Tony McNamara wrote, which I know you've spoken to him as well. So that was one of those things where whilst we were shooting that or afterwards, I'm not entirely sure how it came about, but at some point there was mention of this script that he had of Catherine the Great story. And, you know, I'm such a fan of his writing. I think he's just kind of ripped up the rule book a little bit in terms of period dramas. He's made them, really irreverent and fun and fresh. And the dialogue's kind of the snappiest stuff I think I've ever read and had the luck to kind of get to deliver. So it was one of those where when he mentioned to me about playing Peter in this, it was kind of a no-brainer. I think if Tony said, "Hey, I'm planning on walking off a cliff," he'd be able to convince me to do it with him, you know?
Yeah, that's encouraging. I think, Peter is impulsive and he's kind of idiotic. I think he's hysterical. I think you get, maybe lucky for you, you get all the best one-liners. But what was your way of getting into him, like, to understand who he was so that you could kind of play him authentically and prepare for the role?
Yeah, it's interesting because getting into him, it's not your typical approach to kind of a historic piece where you kind of learn about the times and about the real people. And, whilst we were shooting The Favourite, that wasn't encouraged or relied upon or necessary at all. So I kind of stuck to that method, I suppose, with this, where I really used the kind of the scripts as my Bible. And I think that, the trick with Peter, as you say, he's all those things. He's very mercurial and fun and flippant and silly at times and completely unaware of himself and other people's reactions to himself. But he still has, that's, again, it's in Tony's writing. You just kind of get these little slithers of information about him kind of peppered in occasionally, like what it's like growing up in a royal family, I suppose, and, being surrounded by all these people who are, trying to get what they want out of you, but you're also walking in your father's footsteps, and your mum kind of clearly left you with some scarring and some issues. So it's all those things. And I think he's a big kid in many degrees. He wants to be loved and have fun. And he sees other people kind of stopping him from doing that. I don't know, a lot of people have described him as a psychopath because of how he behaves. And I think he has some of those tendencies, but I don't think he is. I think he is quite an emotional being at times. He just hasn't been brought up in a way that he knows how to understand them or sees them in the same light as everyone else, if that makes sense. Where everyone's living by quite normal standards nowadays and kind of are aware and all this, whereas he's grown up in this bubble where he's just not aware of those norms and things. So he does do terrible things, and I'm not condoning any of it, but for him, they're not outrageous. And I think that's where you try and find not the charm, but that kind of the cheekiness, I suppose, or that a little slight element that maybe lets you get away with it a little bit as the character, because as much as he's the villain and the bad guy, you want people to enjoy him. And that was the fun for me in playing him. He does get a lot of one-liners that are great, and I really enjoyed that kind of. Tony gives you a framework that completely works, so then you have particularly with that kind of character, freedom to just kind of go wild and do whatever you want. So I was having a lot of fun, and hopefully people experience that when watching.
Yeah, like obviously there's something about the way that you played him. I mean, because the show is so irreverent and it's very explicit, and if you like that kind of thing, it's very fun. There's a lot of C words and F words, and the more the better, as far as I'm concerned. It doesn't aim to be historically accurate at all, and the tone is very similar to what we saw in The Favourite. So as you've just said, that must give you more freedom to kind of make him larger than life and even likable, even though he's a bit of a dirtbag, but he is actually really likable. And that must be, is that a challenge to do that?
I mean, it's not something, is it challenging to make him likable? Again, it's one of those where I don't know, you don't want to try and manipulate people into liking him. You just want to be able to show all sides of the character, I suppose. And that's the good thing about doing TV, is you do get time to do that. over 10 hours, you kind of get to see these characters change and evolve and different aspects of their nature. So yeah, the freedom and the fun of it is the really key thing, which I was kind of holding on to, and the rhythm of Tony's language. It is very flippant and irreverent, and you can kind of toss everything away, and you've got to keep the pace moving, I feel, because his writing has a really wonderful way of kind of presenting everything up front and everyone being quite direct in many manners in what they're saying, but then suddenly kind of sneaking up on you with an emotional kind of gut punch in there. And that's what I feel like is going on within this series. And it was something that I kind of was unexpecting of when we were shooting The Favourite, I would say, because I didn't see a lot of more of the emotional stuff within that, because my character wasn't involved with that. So when I saw the film, I was like, oh, wow, there's all this stuff undertowing it. And you need that in anything, I think, whether it's drama, comedy, whatever, you kind of need those shades, don't you, to keep people interested and to feel the different emotions.
Yeah, definitely. And that's Tony's true talent. He is so good at that kind of writing. It's so ridiculous and over the top and explicit and rude, but there's this undercurrent of like empathy, or I don't know, it's hard to explain for someone like me. I've got a tiny brain and I can only really take in so much at a time. But whenever I was seeing you guys perform some of that stuff, I always wonder stuff like this. Like, do you pick up a script and think, oh shit, this is, how the hell are we going to get through this? Like, it was, sometimes it's actually really colorful and you're doing really like ridiculous things, like humping on a bed whilst having a discussion about the weather, like that kind of thing. Did you find that was particularly fun to do?
There were some physical aspects, that were tricky to do. Because that was something that, again, it was kind of, I was fortunate to have had that experience beforehand, because part of the rehearsal period for The Favourite was 2 weeks of the kind of core group of cast in a room running scenes until we knew them kind of, ready. We could almost put it on like a play, essentially. We knew them that well, like pace readings of the dialogue, readings where you had to hum when people pointed at you. You had to copy people dancing whilst doing the scene. And so you were given these physical tasks whilst doing the dialogue. And so going into this, I knew that it's really, really key that you have to be on top of the dialogue, which again is very different. I mean, just doing this quantity, you'd have 6-8 pages a day sometimes, and that's I mean, at a TV pace, that's a lot to remember. So I know Elle and I would at times would go in and we'd look at the sides, or we'd look at the pages for the next day, and you could see like one of us would be so relieved when you saw a chunk of dialogue and it'd be the other one, and then or you'd point out the other person had to learn a huge chunk that night, and you'd be like, oh no, okay. Because it's not dialogue that you can ever be reaching for or searching for in the moment and kind of finding. It has to be sharp and on point. So particularly with the physical stuff, whether it's a sex scene or anything else going on, that's just kind of I'm not very good at multitasking anyway.
I know the feeling.
Around with me, they're like, oh, you can't look at your phone and listen at the same time. I can't do anything at the same time. So for me, like physical activities whilst giving dialogue and trying to act and all those sorts of things, and also it's just funny stuff as well. So I'm the worst person for cracking up, and like once I go, it's very difficult for me to rein it back in and quit laughing.
Yeah, that reminds me that I'm hoping they will release the blooper reel, because it's probably going to have some real gems in there. Given that it is a very
there is a good blooper reel. Yeah, there is.
Because obviously, the show is explicit, as we've talked about. There's a lot of sex in it, a lot of violence. There's a lot of nudity as well. Does that stuff, that doesn't seem to bother you at all? Do you find that challenging, or is it just kind of stuff that you're used to doing by this stage of your career?
I think it does bother me. I think it bothers me, but I have to pretend it doesn't bother me, and that's in the moment. I try not to let it faze me too much. And I mean, this one was interesting because, a lot of the sex stuff is actually kind of fully clothed. So that's not so exposing or intimidating in many ways. But yeah, there were scenes where Peter's kind of born again, I suppose, and he decides that he doesn't want to wear clothes walking around the palace. I remember hearing about it for the first time and chatting to Tony, and I was obviously a little bit concerned, because also in my head I was just like, oh, do I want to be taking my clothes off on TV, really? And then I kind of read a few pages and Tony explained the jokes and where it was coming from and all this, and I was kind of like, okay, I'm in for this. I think we had a negotiation, because there's one scene within that kind of sequence where I have to walk down the long hallway. And they've built these magnificent sets for this show, but this one long hallway, it's probably 300-400 meters long. It's a long hallway, and it looks even longer when you turn up in it naked. And I think on the day they were planning on having like 60 extras in there, and I think I negotiated them down to like 30. I was like, come on, guys, give me like just give me slightly less of the people in here, because you've already got like 30 crew and like how many people, and they closed the set off, so it's not like people just milling around eating their lunch while you're naked.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's still like one of those where there's a lot of people about. So I negotiated down on the supporting artist that day.
Oh, what a relief. That just looks so intimidating. Even if you've done it many times before, I don't think it ever gets old. Speaking of crazy scenes, I'm going to ask you what your highlight scene is in terms of comedy. For me, it was when halfway through the season, the character played by Dan Wiley picks up Peter's his mother's rotting mummified corpse and starts to have his way with her. I thought that was the most ridiculous, hilarious. I thought that was brilliant because it was just so wrong. Did you have any scenes in particular where you felt the same way?
Ooh, that scene was hilarious, and that was I mean, also because I think it's the only time we use a flashback throughout the whole series, because you kind of know that Mariel, Phoebe Fox's character, has been her ladyship status, is that the right way of phrasing it, has been taken away. So you know that something's happened with her father, and then so that's the only time you get a flashback, is to see what her father did that was so horrendous. At that point as well, we've obviously set up how much Peter loves his mum, even though she was horrendous to him. There's so many highlights scene-wise. They're genuinely, it's difficult to pick out. I mean, I loved the sequence going to the dacha, the Swedish king and queen, Freddie Fox, in those scenes. Kind of that thing where it's all set up that they're going to be these two rival emperors going at each other, and then we get there, and the king of Sweden is just kind of exactly almost a carbon copy of Peter, and they get along like a house on fire. And that was something that was really fun for me, just to kind of have a taste of my own medicine in a way of what I'd been doling out through the series. And the other one that's coming to mind at the moment is I found it very difficult. Douglas Hodge is brilliant as Velementov, and it's so difficult to not to laugh in scenes with him. But then finally there was one scene where I was allowed to, and it was the scene where he offers to become Catherine's lover if we need a new lover for her. And it's the only time that I was allowed to kind of fully break loose and laugh in Doug's face. And I needed it so bad, because I'd been trying not to laugh because he's so funny for so long. So that was definitely it. And then, there's so many favorite scenes. And then definitely there's two big scenes that Elle and I have in the final episode, in the finale, I guess, which I know we were both kind of psyched up for, and we'd enjoyed kind of our sparring matches up until then. With our scenes normally in the breakfast room, but then there was these final two where it was kind of the climax of the series, and I know we were both excited to go at each other, and there's so many backs and forths of who's got the power and the upper hand and what's going on between these two characters and the emotions behind them, and that was just wonderful to do those scenes with. It's so much fun. So that would be another one. Yeah, there's loads.
There are loads. Well, that's the season finale. You both get to kind of pivot a bit more into it was a more dramatic scene, because we think Catherine has the upper hand, but Peter's not as stupid as people may believe he is, and he then does get the upper hand at some point, and we see, he's betrayed. There's a whole bunch of things you're doing in that scene. And there's a lot of dialogue too. So, you've mentioned it already, but did you find that was a really fitting way to end the season for Peter? And hopefully we get a second season. We may not. So that's where we leave him now. He's kind of won, but maybe not. And we just don't really know where we're going to land with him.
Yeah, hopefully he's not left in that scenario. Obviously everyone ultimately knows that Catherine kind of wins. And takes the throne. So that's where Peter's story in theory will end, if we hopefully do get a second series. But so it would feel slightly weird to leave him in that scenario. But also that's not where I was expecting to leave the series. If I'm honest, we were kind of receiving the scripts as we went. And I loved where Tony took it to, because it was also unexpected. You know, each character has their own different arc and switch and turn around, and that's not where I was expecting to leave it. So it was exciting, and it was also just a mad time, because I remember like we were coming towards the end of the shoot, and then we knew we had to go to Italy for the final week, and that was encroaching really fast. But then part of the roof of one of the studios fell down, so we couldn't go into one of the studios. So all of the other scenes were like getting backed up on each other. But we knew we needed time for those two scenes, because they're just so long and so much to do within each one of them. There's kind of physical as well, physical stuff. There's actually a whole sex part of one of those scenes, which they didn't end up using in the edit as well, in the final scene. So we shot a lot for that. And we kind of both knew that we really needed to turn up on our game. So I think those were the only two scenes that we really got a little bit of time to rehearse, like at lunchtime, just to kind of block roughly through where we might be going and what we might be doing. But yeah, so it's a fun place to end, Peter, for the series, and unexpected for me, and I enjoy that. But it would be nice to be able to continue to see where it goes, because I just think there's a lot more to discover. I don't know.
I agree. Before we let you go, I've loved you in so many films, but I have to bring up Mad Max Fury Road. It's like, you know, one of the greatest films ever made. What was your highlight from working on that Australian masterpiece of cinema?
Oh, yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about it a fair bit at the moment, because, you know, I think it was just the 5-year anniversary of it coming out. And I feel so fortunate to have been a part of it. I mean, I'm incredibly proud of that film. And what was the highlight of it? I mean, it's always the people and the overall experience. George Miller, I think his mind and imagination and his creativity is something just I'm in awe of, and to be around him, and you know, I'm still in touch with him and happy to see him occasionally. So that's lovely, and made great friendships. I don't know, the thing that really stands out for me is just that environment, being in the desert. And then I remember clearly sitting in Nux's vehicle, my character's vehicle, one time, and there were like kind of the Giga horse and the Doofmobile, I think it was called, and all these bikes and all these like cars and trucks, and the stunt team was so amazing on that. There were, I think, 150 stunt team, kind of all loaded up on vehicles, playing all the war boys and imperators and all this sort of stuff, and everyone was so fired up and in character. And they gave the signal for everyone to start their engines, and we just drive for 15-20 minutes in the desert and keep rolling, and the cameras kind of find you on a Russian arm roaming around. And so for that time, you'd hear the engines go up, your arms, the hairs on your arms would stand up, and everyone would start screaming and yelling. You just get so kind of carried away in that moment. It was very liberating and freeing. So that's kind of the thing that's seared in my memory, because it's very rare that you get to feel like you're part of a post-apocalyptic war feat and war crew, and for it to be that realistic in many ways. You know what I mean? It was all practical. It was all around us. And I think a lot of the time, if people were shooting that, they'd kind of be there in the studio and they'd go, okay, this is happening over here. But it was actually all around us. And for like 15-20 minutes of a take, it would just be that, with people banging on your roof, and you'd suddenly see the camera come and you'd be like, all right, I think that's the dialogue time. We'll do that. And so that's probably the main takeaway, just how impressive, like, all of that was, the logistics side and the stunts, and how accurate it is as well. When you look back, there was a kind of a comic book version of the film that George had, which was actually the script that I first read when I got the part. And when you look back at that now, you kind of see it shot for shot for what the film then became in many ways. So it's amazing to do it like that.
It's incredible. And it reminded me, finally, given that I've heard you described as a scene stealer before, like in The Favourite, I definitely thought you were that. And that's meant to be a compliment. It's not, you know, it means you demand attention. And I think like now with
from an actor's
what do you think?
Scene stealer can be a little bit of a dirty thing, you know what I mean?
I know. But it's kind of true. And now I'm seeing on social media that there's a Huzzah drinking game, which is pretty cool. And that's a lot of that is got to do with you and your character. So I think it's really, what do you think? Do you like the idea that people think that your characters seem to be scene stealers, or they demand attention? That's something kind of cool, is it maybe?
I certainly don't want to be like a tricky actor that's like stealing scenes. But at the same time, I guess they're characters that are I've been having fun with them and like messing about a lot, and kind of particularly with Tony's work, they do get a lot of one-liners, and they're unpredictable and kind of fun to watch, I guess. But yeah, I'm not trying to do that. I'm just trying to mess around, I guess, and do different stuff. But maybe I'll try the drinking game. Maybe that'll be how I finish off my quarantine. I'll come out with a massive hangover.
Oof. Yeah, there'd be a lot of drinking every time you said huzzah. Mate, thanks so much for your time.
It was like an exercise in how many different ways you can say huzzah throughout a 10-hour.
Oh, really?
It was in many ways. You know, you'd see it written on the page, and you'd be like, all right, so what? It could mean anything essentially after a while. That's kind of a fun game.
Oh, and that never occurred to me, but I'm going to look out for that, because there's the huzzah and there's the huzzah and there's the huzzah. There's a whole bunch of ways that you could probably
it could mean anything.
All of your acting could mean anything, exactly.
I'm going to do it just huzzah show reel.
That's it. I think that's what the social media is clamoring for right now in this desperate time for entertainment. So, mate, thank you for your time. Thank you for a great performance on The Great. And huzzah.
Thank you, man. Huzzah. Nice. Thank you so much.
Everyone go to goldderby.com, make your predictions, click subscribe. We've got plenty of contender chats, just like this fantastic one with Nicholas.